Name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Uh, Another Friday. Thank you so much for joining me. We're getting very near Christmas uh, here in Montreal, so mostly snow covered and mostly cold, but uh, I'm glad to be able to speak to so many of you online on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube. And today we are going to cover a smaller chapter. But what is interesting about this is it helps reconcile a discussion that I have been having through this platform for the last few weeks. And that is the discussion about who is accountable. If God says that God will choose who to guide right and who to guide wrong, then is it really a person's fault if they are not following the rules and regulations of the book or the guidances of the book? Is it really their fault if God is guiding them wrong? Or is it their fault? Or is it their, what shall I say, benefit? Or is it something remarkable about their personality that they're on the right track? Or is God simply arranging things? This brings into question the conversation about determinism and free will. Determinism meaning things are written for you and this is how things will be and you will stick to that path. Fair enough. We know the concept. And free will, as we have been introduced to through, particularly through American media, but also through religion, free and science, free will is a human being's ability to make their own decisions, right or wrong. So in the first 7-8 chapters, we have seen this recurring theme of Allah, the God of Islam and God of all of us. Allah is just the Arabic term for it. God saying to the human being that I will guide you right and I will guide you wrong. And if that is actually the case, then we have no discussion about accountability. Then do whatever you want because God is the one guiding you on that path. And I've been trying to wrestle with that. And my only argument to resolve that was conscience. Human beings' conscience, which scientifically we don't know if it exists as a spirit or a soul, but metaphysically or non-scientifically, if that's ever a mode of thought, we do believe that it exists and that it comes from God, at least in most religions. Here, the chapter is titled The Night. So now we've had the Most High, the Wrapped One, the beginning, and so forth. Now it is the night. And here I think there's a bit more clarity about that concept. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. By the night as it envelops. By the day as it appears in brightness. By him who created male and female. So now another creation is here. So we know, I don't think the male and female topic has been touched upon before. If I'm mistaken, please go through my videos and tell me if I'm mistaken. But as far as I recall, the male-female topic has not been touched upon before. This is the first time it has been said. First, it is the skies and the animals and the plants and the hellfire and the gardens and all those things. But male and female hasn't been touched upon before, which is why this is very important. By him who created male and female, certainly your efforts and deeds are diverse. Different in aims and purposes. I don't know who that's talking about. Is it talking about male and female or all of us? Or is it meaning both? In all accounts, it makes sense. In Islam, men and women have distinct roles. I know that is very, very, very different from the way the Western media in particular is moving since World War II, and how it is coloring a lot of parts of the world, particularly the post-colonial countries. I understand that. But we are talking about a religion that has continued for 1400 years. Here, by him who created men and female, certainly your efforts and deeds are diverse, different in names and purposes. It could be talking about male and female, but it could be talking about each one of us. You can take that argument as you like. As for him, who gives in charity and keeps his duty to God and fears God and believes in Al al-husna. Now, al-husna is an Arabic term which means the best, which is no God but God, or a reward from God. So it could be either thing. So somebody who believes in that and gives charity. So now we've talked a bit about prayer, about being good to the fellow man, about self-control, but here believes in the beautiful and the best and the greatest and gives charity. Charity is very different from tax. If any of you are in that tax bracket, you would know what I'm talking about. Charity, as opposed to tax, is something that we do willingly. And in Islam, there's also differentiation there. So this is not zakat. There's no mention of zakat, which is the Islamic term for the tax that you pay. This is charity, giving of your own free will. We will make smooth for him the path of ease and goodness. Yep, mentioned before. But he who is greedy, a miser, and thinks himself self-sufficient. A lot of us do. Let's be honest. A lot of us do. In this book, according to this religion, that approach is wrong. But may I just remind you, according to most religions, in fact, all religions, but I don't want to be that confident, that approach is wrong. To be greedy, miserly, and to think of yourself as self-sufficient. I had a toothache just over 10 days ago, and if I had ever thought of myself as self-sufficient, that dismissed the idea, because we are not. But here it talks about the narration of this term self-sufficient, narrated by the great Caliph Ali, who I've named after. Thank you so much, Radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he who is one of the most respected people in Islam and in history. We were in the company of the Prophet, and he said, "There is none among you but has his place written for him, either in paradise or in the hellfire." We said, "O God's messenger, shall we depend on this fact and give up work?" I've talked about this before, and I'll talk about it later, because this is something that I struggled with for 12, 13 years. If I am going to be rewarded based on who I am, should I stop trying? Should I give up or continue? He replied, "No, carry on doing good deeds, for everybody will find it easy to do such deeds as they will lead him to his destined place." Amazing. Then the Prophet recited, "As for him who gives in charity and keeps his duty to God and fears him and believes in Al-Husna, the greatest, the beautiful and the best, we will make smooth for him the path of ease," which is this verse, these 5 verses he recited. Very interesting, Prophet Muhammad. It's interesting that it was being recited at, this is now the time he has a small group of people who is preaching to. The merchant who was revered in society and then reviled in that society, not loved, hated, resisted to a great degree. Now he has a group of people who is speaking to. Ali, Radiallahu anhu, obviously one of them. But he who is greedy and miserly and thinks himself self-sufficient and denies Al-Husna, which is the best about God and no God but God, we will make smooth for him the path for evil. Now, let's meditate on that a minute. For weeks, I have been talking about God saying, "I will guide who is right and I will guide who is wrong," and that's it. But here, it's slightly different, isn't it? Somebody who denies what is being preached. Now, there is a hierarchy of differentiation. One may always argue, maybe this person was conditioned to deny. Fair enough. But that's where the free will argument comes in. We will make smooth for him the path for evil. And what will his wealth avail him when he goes down in destruction? Now, it's a philosophical reference, but it's also a contextual reference, because a lot of the people who were opposing Muhammad, peace be upon him, at the time, whether they were members of his family or society, were people who had a lot of wealth. We've talked about one of his uncles, Abu Lahab, a few weeks ago, who had a lot of sons, a lot of money, a lot of power. And this verse keeps coming back to it. What is your wealth going to do to you do for you when you're going down in destruction. Now, this is a mentality, thankfully, that we've adopted, at least in the 21st century, but also the 20th. It doesn't mean you don't work hard or you don't become a billionaire. Go do you. But what it means is amassing wealth and believing that it will protect you from all harm is wrong. That's not how life works. Truly on us is to give guidance. Now God is showing himself to be responsible. That is the interesting part. It is upon us, it is incumbent upon us to give guidance. This resolves the whole discussion about determinism and free will. How? Determinism is your fate is written for you. Free will is do whatever you want. Even I, as the God of all the universe, do not know what you're going to do. But here we have a caveat. Things are written for you. There is a restriction to what you can do. You can't burst into flames. Okay? So even physically, there is a determinism. You can't transmute into the universe or a star. Not yet, anyway. So that's written. And you have free will to decide what you are going to do and what you're not going to do. And there's the infinitely many possibility of life and existence, of space-time, but that's not the discussion. Here, the caveat is, it is incumbent upon us to give guidance. By us, God means God. So now your responsibility, if you want to follow that path and reach the goodness that is being preached in the book, is simply follow the guidance. If you don't want to follow it, and you don't want to follow the paradise that is being mentioned in this religion, maybe you have a different religion, maybe you have a different set of beliefs, maybe you are not interested in going to paradise, then you don't follow it. Now you become responsible. God's responsibility is to give guidance. Stated right here, verse 12, chapter 92. It is incumbent upon us, truly on us it is to give guidance. And truly unto us belong the last hereafter and the first this world. Therefore I have warned you of a blazing hellfire, or blazing fire of hell. Yes, God, you have warned us. I've been reading these chapters with thousands of people on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever. Thank you, all of us. Thank you, all of you, for joining and being part of this. But we've been reading it, and yes, I verify that hell has been mentioned, and it has not been mentioned as a pleasant place. None shall enter it save the most wretched, who denies and turns away. Again, look at the terminology here. Denies. So denies is very different from someone saying, well, I was just born this way. How dare you throw me into hell? Denies shows culpability, responsibility, rational thought, or thought at least. It shows that you have made a decision. It shows a hierarchy between deciding to do something and not deciding to do something, A, and a second hierarchy between deciding to do that thing or its opposite. So to deny and turn away is a decision that you have made, and you are responsible for it. Therefore, the determinism free will argument is pretty much reconciled here, because here God is providing the information. Guidance is upon God, and those who are the most wretched, who deny and turn away, well, you're gonna go to hell. And al-muttaqun, the pious, will be far from removed from it. By it means hell. He who spends his wealth for increase in self-purification, and who has in mind no favor from anyone to be paid back, which means when you give charity, when you give from your wealth, it's not because you're trying to pay somebody back. It's because you are doing it out of the goodness of your own heart. That is what charity is. I mean, If you don't believe me, open the Bible. Follow the life of Jesus Christ. Follow the life of any great Christian, any great Muslim, any great Hindu, and you'll realize that charity is always from the heart. It's never to achieve a certain purpose. Charitable organizations are a different topic. That's a political argument. But charity is from the heart. And who has in mind no favor from anyone to be paid back, except to seek countenance of his Lord, the Most High. The Most High. This was mentioned last week, wasn't it? We talked about God being the Most High. So very nicely referenced God. Well done. He surely will be pleased when he will enter paradise. Well, let's all for you. My Lord, I am pleased, and the reason for that is I've been struggling with this discussion back and forth. Now, there are some offshoots to it, such as even if God provides the guidance, maybe he also wrote that we will not guide you and we will guide you right. That's almost a faulty syllogism, and I don't want to get into the epistemic conundrum of this faulty logic, because you can always question it with these three questions. Is God the strongest in the universe? Yes. Can he make a huge rock or huge anything? Yes. Can God make such a huge rock that he can't lift it himself? Faulty logic. So the syllogism breaks apart when you try to reconcile it that way. So we're not going to do that. We have been talking about God saying repeatedly, we will choose to guide he who will go on the right path and the wrong path. That has been a recurring theme, but here in this chapter, it has been mentioned that it is incumbent upon us to guide. It is incumbent upon us to give guidance. And those of you who deny it and turn away, they will be the wretched and they will face the hellfire. Now, this is why I love my reading of the Quran, because I'm not reading it how it is arranged. I'm reading it how it was revealed according to Noldic, according to Tanzil, according to a few authorities that you also can access online. And they've arranged the chapters in order of revelation, which is how I'm reading it. And in this reading, you start realizing that a philosophy is built gradually. So first, you had the image of the God who created. We know God creates. We know God is great. God is affirming Muhammad that you're not going mad. Stay on the right path. Then God is telling Muhammad to get some sleep. Then God is telling Muhammad some great deed will be put upon you. Then God is describing the greatness of the universe and of all that exists. And then God is repeatedly saying, we will choose who goes right and we will choose who goes wrong. Repeatedly. That is a theme about determinism, responsibility, accountability. And now God introduces the idea that it is incumbent upon God to give guidance. I think that is fantastic. I think that is a beautiful verse, because the struggle that we were having for the last 8 weeks about accountability is now pretty much resolved. The guidance is there. It is incumbent upon God to give it. Whether God gives it via religion, via conscience, via science, via friends, via anything else, via epiphanies that you may or may not experience. It is incumbent upon God to follow them. And those who turn away or deny it by making a rational decision, a hierarchy of choices, and you choose to deny it and turn away and become wretched, there is hellfire. Because of this elucidation, because of this illustration, we can't say anymore that man did not know, because you are being told in Islam, and you are being told in Christianity and Buddhism and Judaism and Hinduism and all religions that have existed, all modes of beliefs, whether they come from a god, are the imaginings of a schizophrenic person, or whether somebody just created the world's most beautiful lie. Whatever the case is, the source is not as important right now as the material. Because the argument is not where it comes from, the argument is whether it has validity. And now, after this rational deconstruction of these few sentences, I assert that yes, it does have validity when God says, I will guide you right, I will guide you wrong, because it is incumbent upon me to give guidance. So if it is incumbent upon God to give that guidance, God is going to give it in whatever form. And if you deny it, then it's on you. That's a whole lens of looking at existence. I'm not saying it's an existential or phenomenological lens per se, or a temporal one, even for that matter. That's a different argument, which I call the God perspective. But the point here is now it is pretty much reconciled, that it is God's, I wouldn't say duty, because you're too big for me to talk about you having a duty, God. But if I could anthropomorphize you for a minute, God, it is your duty to give us guidance. Yes, I mean, I talk to God all the time, so I consider us great friends, some entity that I love more than everything else in the entire world, more than religion, more than my political ambitions, more than my family, more than my parents. I love God more than anything in the entire universe. And God, I hope I'm not on the wrong track of logos when I'm trying to explain what you've said here, that it is your duty to provide guidance, and it is our duty to choose whether to follow that guidance or to deny it. And in that choice, we are deciding for ourselves what our fate will be post-mortality. Whether we will go into the gardens of paradise or burn in the fires of hell, or whether there's a spectrum. It hasn't been talked about, but I think about it all the time. Whether there's an absolute heaven and an absolute hell, and there's a spectrum in between, and human beings will be moved along. I don't know. This book came out, or this book was sequentially revealed 1400 years ago. They had a different conception of how the world is than we do today. We talk about the spectrum a lot. So I'm glad that this discussion is reconciled. Thank you, Lord, for doing this. I thank all of you for joining me today. It's Friday. It's nearing the end of December. Everybody's getting ready for the holidays, at least in the West. And in the East, you're just enjoying the winter. Or in the shall I say, colonial or Christian countries, you're just enjoying the winter. Or in the Southern Hemisphere, the summer. But thank you so much for joining me on a Friday. Next week, we will be covering one of my favorite chapters. And it's also in the last book. It's called The Break of Dawn. The Break of the Day, or Dawn, which is Surah Al-Fajr, wal-Fajr wa layalin ashr. I love this chapter. Most times when I pray, I recite it once or twice whenever I'm praying. I love this chapter, and it goes back to how I was taught it by my teacher. But yeah, that is going to be next week, Surah Fajr, which means the dawn. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful